Hello everybody, this is Imaduddin Aisha again, SF author and researcher from Cairo, Egypt, and today I'm going to do something different. Instead of trashing you-know-who made you-know-what, Dune Part 1, Denis Villeneuve, and his lack of world-building skills, lack of science fiction skills, I'm going to do something positive for a change. I just got this in the mail, a special package from Canada, and it had this in it. Thyme Travellers, an anthology of Palestinian speculative fiction. Not just science fiction, speculative. There's magic realism, fantasy, surrealism, there's hard sci-fi, and different genres of hard sci-fi. There's cyberpunk, quite a lot of cyberpunk, there's alien contact, there's time travel, and some other things. It's weighted more towards magic realism and fantasy, of course. That's more popular in the Arab world. And science fiction is still a bit new, particularly to Palestinians. We're good at surrealism, however. We like living in fantastical worlds well, you can guess why. Fantastical worlds that are almost as bad as the world we actually do live in. There's 14 stories here, and some of the authors are friends of mine. Sonia Suleiman, the editor, it's her book project, her dream. She's got a story in there. Leila Azmi al-Hushi, she's in there. She's more of a literary critic, but she also writes a little speculative fiction. There's Nadia Afifi, probably the top cyberpunk author in the Arab world, which I never knew about. Even though I wrote a whole chapter on Palestinian science fiction, I'd never heard of her. For some reason, nobody ever mentioned her. And well, she's American Palestinian, to be fair. And J.D. Harlock, I do know him. He's Palestinian Lebanese, and he's probably the top cyberpunk author in Lebanon, if not the Middle East. Now, stories, all of the stories are great, and by all means, you read them first to make your own mind up what you like the most. But these are my favorites. Or these are not favorites. These are the most interesting stories, I should say. There's Cyrano de AI by Carl El-Koura, and there's Remembrance in Cerulean by Elise Stephens. Cyrano de AI is about an AI chip you put in your head, and the characters in the place are all in Canada. And they don't seem to have anything at all to do with Palestine, Palestinians, Arabic causes, Islam, the Middle East. Same thing with Remembrance in Cerulean. That's why these two stories really stand out. Here, Remembrance in Cerulean is about alien contact, first contact with an alien race, and you have this man who's put in charge of dealing with these aliens who come to Earth living in the sea. They're like squid, very intelligent, and he has to try to convince the authorities that they mean us no harm and that we should get along well with them. And in the process, they communicate to him. I can't remember if it's telepathically or through chemicals in the water, and they tell him about his father who died also on a mission dealing with them. And that just created the bad impression that they were like invading Earth, which they weren't. They just needed to come here. They had their own problems. And again, there's no Arabs. I think it's in North America. There's no Arabs, Muslims, Palestine, Middle East, anything. And yet the two stories in some ways are the most relevant in the anthology to the themes in the anthology. And that's the beauty of science fiction and speculative fiction. You can talk about something else, something very far removed, but it can be more relevant to what you're trying to get at than if you talk about the thing directly. That's the beauty of it compared to realist literature. It's all allegory and symbolism and world building and looking at the possibilities and potentials and finding these kind of parallel tracks between this situation and that situation. The AI chip story, you put an AI chip in your head when you're a kid, and it helps you with spelling and grammar. It's like Grammarly. You've all heard of it. And it improves your cognitive functions, improves your waking up on time, your work ethic, these kind of things. But there's a downside typically, because you're not the one doing all those things. The AI chip is. And women complain to the hero, switch the damn thing off. I want to listen to you. I want to hear you talk to me. I want to hear what you're thinking. And I go, what do you mean? What's wrong with what I'm saying? And I'm saying that I want to know if it's you who's saying that, not the AI chip. And in the end of the story, you have the hero and his father, and they're having breakfast, and they turn off their chips, and it changes the way they see things. It's like playing around with the desaturation button, that kind of thing. And the father passes off some wisdom down to the son on how to talk to girls and How I Met Your Mother and these kind of things. And again, it's sincere because it's not the AI chip. And it's this whole thing about passing down wisdom and passing down memory from one generation to the next, and how the current generation is kind of in awe of the previous generation and cut off and can't really talk to them and can't really look at them as people that have the same problems and adventures as they do. And that's a very common theme throughout the whole book. The other story about remembrance is Cerulean. You have these aliens come to Earth like squid living in the sea, and at first human beings think they're trying to invade, and they try to kill them or see what's to happen. And the guy who's talking to them, like I said, his father perished, and he also he's haunted by the memory of his father, and always feels that he can't live up to his standard. And then he finds out from the Ceruleans what actually happened, and he gets to relive those moments and see the good and bad that his father did, and how he came out okay in the end, whatever his fears were and prejudices were at first. And again, the boy reconciles himself with the memory of his father, and he can go on with the rest of his life. And that's a very common theme you find in these stories, but they're done so precisely here, and with such nice narrative, such lovely narrative flow, and in a way that's very plausible scientifically. And these are really two impressive stories, and I'm definitely going to read these authors in the future. You have similar themes in Nadia Afifi's stories, The Generation Ship. You have an old lady dying, and she recorded everything on a microprocessor on something like a flash drive, and she gives it to one of her grandchildren and trusts him to tell the rest of them what he saw on it. And he found out some very interesting things he didn't know about his grandma and about society in her day and age, when we as kids today think everything back then was perfect and everything back then was really conservative, and it wasn't actually on either count. And they learn as kids to reconcile with each other and stop being jealous of each other and thinking, oh, you're the perfect boy, no, I'm the one who's really hardworking, I'm the one who should represent the family's interest, and these things, these common Arabic family problems. And also, interesting enough, even though it's cyberpunk, there's an extra twist in the tale. The grandmother also has these simulations in her head of what her life could have been like if she'd done different decisions, particularly when it comes to relationships and marrying their grandfather. And in the process, again, the kids see that, life is what it is. You make the best of what you can. You take what life throws at you, and you don't cry over spilt milk, and you don't keep regretting. And in the process, you overcome this feeling that maybe you missed out on something, constantly burning you on the inside. And like I said, it helps them with the rest of their lives. One of my favorite stories is Gaza Luna by Samah Surur Fadil. It's a kind of alternative history story. You have this guy, he was a kid and a refugee, and he was smuggled out of Gaza, and he ended up in America, and he became a success and joined, essentially worked for NASA, trained for working for NASA, and distinguished. Then it turns out his paperwork was phony. His aunt did it to get him out of the country safe, and he had to go back to Gaza again the same way he went out, retracing his steps, so to speak, going backwards in time. And while he's there, he meets friends of his from when he was a kid, and he finds that they're doing a secret space project. The Ottoman Turks in their dying days had a space project. Of course, that's not for real. None of this actually happened, but they convince you that that actually happened in the past, and that the future could have been different if the Ottoman Empire had kept on going and the Arabs had stayed not part of Western imperialism. That they could have created their own future with their own hands, through their own indigenous efforts, if it wasn't for war and bad luck. And they revive the science, and they get him, because he's a NASA guy, to build a space rocket to go from Gaza to the moon and spread the message of Palestine and the plight of the Palestinian people, particularly in Gaza. And it's such a fun story and very compact. It's not as hard SF as the previous stories I mentioned, not as plausible, but my God, do you want it to be true. And I said, it's fun. It's so much fun. Most of these stories, interesting enough, aren't tragic and depressing. They're actually quite fun. And you wouldn't expect that from a Palestinian anthology. My story, it's been a while. I wrote it in 2015. It's one of my first batch of stories, and all Palestinian-themed stories. It's a time travel story. It's called The Table Set for Two. And I don't remember exactly what gave me the idea, but I was watching Friday prayer sermon, and something in it said, I think about كلمة لو تفتح عمل الشيطان. The word "what if" opens the door for the work of the devil. And it's again like crying over spilt milk and feeling regret and hoping that you could have done this way, that way. So it involves time travel, and the guy typically messes things up and has to go back again to fix them, and to learn to be patient and to make the best of what he has until a big solution finally happens. Maybe things happen for a reason. Maybe hardships happen for a reason, for us to learn from them. And maybe we did things wrong and we kind of deserved what happened to us. In the Arab world in general, not just talking about the Palestinians. And the guy finds love. He found that well, I won't tell you more. But like I said, I got the idea initially from watching a Friday prayer sermon, and I incorporated elements into from things that I know from my environment, living here in Cairo, Egypt. Things to do with architecture and how multicultural, multi-religious architecture is, even for holy places, and not just in the good old days of the 15th century or the 18th century. Even today in the modern world, you can find wonderful architectural blending of different religious traditions in a single building. And, the prize of cosmopolitanism, and how that's something you should cherish more than immediate victories or political dominance or military power. But please read it yourself and decide for yourself. Okay, I think that's enough. I don't want to spoil anything more. I think I've spoiled my story for you. This is Imad, over and out.